ask El Patricia Ice about Koch Foods, this who owned all of these processing plants, and what is going on here. You have this $3.75 million EEOC settlement, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission settlement, that alleged that in these factories that the workers were being sexually harassed, racially harassed based on their national origin. Clearly, in order to get a settlement like this, these workers had to organize. How is this ICE raid being seen? Is it that ICE is retaliating for the company against workers organizing? Of course, this puts the company in the spotlight as well for all of their abuse.
I don't know if ICE is retaliating because of this $3.5 million settlement or not, but what I see, but it appears that it would be a retaliation. I have been into some of those chicken processing plants. I've been in the one in Morton, and I've been in one in Forest. And I have worked with the Latino community in Scott County for a very long time. I would venture to say at least 20 years. And I know that there was sexual harassment in the plants. I was not involved with that litigation, but I knew about it when it first came to light publicly that was going on. So it is possible that this was a retaliation by the Department of Homeland Security against the immigrant population who was working in those plants. But the conditions are terrible in the plants. It's cold in there. People have to wear jackets. They usually wear white jackets. In these plants, they have to kill the chickens. There's blood on the floor. There's water on the floor. And the people performing the different jobs are exposed, are exposed to machinery. They have to cut the chickens, they package the chickens, etc. And it's not a very good environment.
I'm
women are subject to. Yes,
I'm looking at Think Progress article they wrote. They said, as labor reporter Mike Elk notes at Payday Report, it may not be a coincidence that the Morton plant was raided. There have been at least 2 other plants, one in Salem, Ohio, another in Morristown, Tennessee, where ICE raids have followed complaints of worker conditions. Last year, for example, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, fined Freshmark over $200,000 for 3 separate incidents in which proper safety guards were not in place in its Salem meatpacking plant. A week later, it was raided by ICE. Let me put this question to the mayor of Jackson, to Chokwe Lumumba. This issue of ICE being used as a hammer on activist workers.
Absolutely. I think that if we follow the case studies of what we've seen so far, then it appears to be a punitive measure against the workers. The words of the U.S. Attorney, the Assistant U.S. Attorney here in Mississippi, suggesting that this was an effort to punish the corporations, those words versus their actions just don't match up. The only people who appear to be punished, the punitive measures that were inflicted were against those workers, those individuals who were seeking opportunity, being taken from their jobs, not doing any criminal acts, to be placed in cages, to be locked up, to be taken away from their children. And while some have reportedly been released to take care of their children, the trauma has already ensued. The trauma has already taken effect. For this to be the first day of school for their children, it's unconscionable. And so there appears to be a pattern that has been established here.
And I would just like to add that at least 2 of the plants that were raided were unionized by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. And one of those was the Morton plant, and the other one was the Pico plant in Canton, Mississippi. And unions have been constantly under attack, especially here in Mississippi. So the fact that those plants, and the Morton plant, I believe, is one of the ones that was that is unionized by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, and the fact that those unions have a presence there was probably another reason why the United States government chose to target those plants, because it is clear that the corporations and others want to get rid of unions here in Mississippi and really across the nation. The effects of these raids are going to be long-lasting. As I mentioned earlier, in 2008, I was part of the response to that raid, and I have at least one client that I'm still working with 11 years later as a result of that raid. So, and I'm sure that there are others who are still involved with immigration courts or with the government as a result of that raid. So this has had, as I said, devastating effects on our community. Mississippi is a small state, and the communities that were affected are small communities where people do know one another. They go to church with us. We are in organizations together. We see each other in our neighborhoods, at school, in the grocery store, etc. And so this was a horrendous thing that happened to us here in Mississippi.